Now, when another 7 New Zealanders drowned over Waitangi weekend, the issue of water safety once again came to national attention. Why are our drowning statistics so terrible? And is it time for a few home truths?
New Zealand has lots of things to be proud of. We were the first to give women the vote. We were the first to split the atom, climb Mount Everest, and the first to give permission for a dog to fly a plane. There is something, however, that we should not be proud of: our drowning rate. 108 people in 2016, 7 on Waitangi weekend alone.
New figures show a dramatic increase in the number of people dying in New Zealand rivers.
A group of swimmers was swept down the Waikato River.
Last year, 3 children under the age of 5 drowned.
It's not all people drowning at our dangerous surf beaches either. The different types of drownings show just how complicated and vast our water hazards are in New Zealand. Last year, just under a third of drownings were in a river. 85% of the drowning deaths were males. 75% of the drownings were preventable. We have one of the highest drowning rates in the developed world, nearly twice that of Australia. So why are our numbers so high?
We're an island nation. It's part of who we are as Kiwis, a part of our culture. Our waters are predominantly colder than a lot of other parts of the world, as well as being quite dangerous in terms of rips and currents. So we have a combination of really high participation across a really broad range of activities, but also quite dangerous waters.
With our participation being so high, you would expect this to be a high priority for central government as far as water safety funding goes.
The sector is predominantly non-government funded, and the other thing is the sector is predominantly run by volunteers.
Simon Bridges just announced $600 million of government funding for road safety in New Zealand, whereas Health, Sport and Recreation Minister Jonathan Coleman is a bit tight with his ministerial wallet when it comes to water safety.
Well, I think all Kiwis, including the government, need to ask ourselves, is it acceptable to have one of the highest drowning tolls in the developed world? And if it's not, then we need to do something about it.
The number of drownings we have per year in New Zealand is pretty shocking. It just makes me feel sad, really, because it's the amount of families that are impacted and friends by the loss of a loved one.
I learnt to swim in my school pool, but with over 150 school pools closing in the last 6 years and another 130 at risk of closure due to funding shortfalls, sadly it appears we are trying to swim upstream on this.
If we as a country decide that swimming is a priority for our youngsters, then unfortunately we have to make it mandatory at school to give everyone a chance at being able to buy us time to rescue them. That's all it is.
We're lucky in New Zealand with unlimited access to the most beautiful rivers, lakes and beaches in the world, but we're dying in them, and we shouldn't be.
Well, the project asked the Prime Minister, Bill English, this afternoon what the government is doing to help reduce these high drowning rates, and here's what he told us.
I think we should do as much as possible. I mean, we're losing too many lives, and it's a real tragedy for the families, and in a lot of cases avoidable if people understood water safety better. And in the end, it's up to the schools to determine how what they pay for and how the kids spend their time.
Well, joining us now is Labour Education spokesperson Chris Hipkins, who's had something to say about this in the last few weeks. Chris, you heard the Prime Minister, and what's your reaction?
Well, look, I agree with Bill English. Every drowning is a tragedy and we should do everything we can to avoid them. But I don't agree with him when he says that schools have a choice. At the moment, schools are strapped for cash. They can't afford to do what they're already required to do. I think if we want kids learning to swim at school, then we've got to make sure the government funds that.
Yeah, that's a pretty obvious thing to say, that keeping school pools open and the government paying for that, that's going to help us. But where is that money really going to come from?
Well, look, at the moment, we've got 800 odd schools around the country in deficit. That's around about a third of the schools in the country in deficit at the moment. When I was a kid at school, we learned to swim in the school pool at Waterloo Primary School. Waterloo Primary School are one of the many schools around the country that have given up their school pool. It's no longer there, so kids don't have that choice anymore, and I think that's a real tragedy.
So what are you going to cut in order to pay for the swimming?
I don't think it's a question of cutting things. I think the education sector needs more funding. The schools need more money. Bill English is talking about tax cuts. I would say that this is a much bigger priority.
OK, so you're promising tonight that if Labour becomes government that you will make swimming lessons mandatory?
We will make sure that every kid in the country has the opportunity to get swimming lessons, and that means making sure schools have got the resources to do all of the things that we want them to do. It's all very well to put more and more requirements onto schools, but unless government's willing to stump up with the funding, they're not going to be able to do them.
All right, Chris Hipkins, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, Jessie, as a mum, I think that should be compulsory, learning to swim.
Well, I thought you said Jessie as a mum. I'm not a mum, I'm a dad.
No, you're a dad. I'm the mum.
You do, though. You think about...
Just to be clear about that.
You think about safety for the first time for many of us when you become a parent, and I've always been a terrible swimmer, and so I actually took, like, swimming lessons as an adult.
Right.
I've got to say, it's actually very hard to find an adult, like, beginning to swim class. Would you guys like to see my graduating photo of my class?
Please.
Okay, check this out.
That's
Just a couple of years
so cute.
ago. But now
Yes.
when my kids ask me, can you swim? I say I can swim as well as any 6-year-old can.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Yet another good reason to learn to swim so you don't have to grow up and be like Jessie.
Just so you know, I've got some topless photos of me as well, so it's not just a Jessie thing.
We'll be spreading them out throughout the year.
Something to look forward to.